Something I gotta be really clear about, like, it crystal clear as you can possibly see, is that having a negative mindset, and I don't mean this in the normie advice, bro, just go to the gym, just think positive thoughts to cancel out the negative ones sense. You know, the most memeified, straw manned version of this perspective that you have no doubt heard spouted off a million times by people who hate themselves on the internet, unlike myself, who generally admires myself to a moderate degree. These things that you've heard from these people who have mental illness. I'm not going to say that stuff. Unlike the things that they will say, I'm going to take the position that they are strawmanning in efforts to perpetuate their own sadness and suffering, and then form a group around that sadness and suffering, so that they can at first feel less alone and then eventually feel like leaving that group or having anyone leave that group is confirmation that they can change, which is terrifying because anything other than the status quo for these people is terrifying, and yada yada yada. It's a self-imposed cycle, and that's what these people are experiencing, and they are using internet memes and the power of information on the internet to impose that cycle on themselves and to reinforce it internet-wide by joining communities that seek to do exactly that. So I want to talk about the phrase, it's over. You know, you've probably seen this parodied many times. You've probably seen it used sarcastically by many people, such as myself. It has been co-opted to be used for a wide array of purposes that have gone far, far away, far beyond the place where it originally came from, which is amongst deeply sad, alienated, some of whom happen to be narcissistic and self-obsessed people who inhabit the so-called incel sphere, or involuntarily celibate, which, as I've said many times on this channel, is a fake term. I do not think that legitimate incels exist. If I can go outside for 5 minutes, not even having walked a whole kilometer, and see a big ass fat guy who definitely doesn't have a lot of money but has a solid 7 to 8 out of 10 woman, I think that just about disproves this notion that the black pill has overtaken society and that we ought to return to traditional gender roles and all this other nonsense these people believe. But this video isn't about any of that. This video is not to deconstruct the extreme extent to which these people go to justify their mental illness and delusions. This video is strictly about this phrase, it's over. Because I hear people who are not as deranged and insane as the incel crowd who use this term, and sometimes they use it in earnest. And I want to talk about how there are legitimate points made by some of these depressed folks when they say, you know, just go to the gym, bro, is not an effective solution. When they say, just improve your charisma is not an effective solution. When they say, just get more experience is not an effective solution. These things are very, very simple statements, and they often lack the context that is specific to a person's situation, which tends to be vital in understanding how exactly that person will move beyond the situation that they're currently in. So we need an individualized approach when we approach people. And even if I were to speak to the people who I just railed against in the beginning of this video as like delusional and insane and so on, I would probably approach them in better faith than that, because even though they say things that are delusional and insane, it's worth pointing out that there are causes, psychological or environmental or economic, that lead to these extremist ideas being appealing to them. So we do have to show empathy to people when dealing with them on an individual level. There isn't a moral obligation to do that, but I think in general it is a just thing to do. And that is, to put aside my own preconceived notions about this group and the biases that I harbor, which ultimately come out in how I deride them with these inflammatory terms. That being said, my primary point with this video, like my intention, what I intend to get out here, is that the it's over thing is bad. It's not bad because you should just think more positive thoughts, or because you should just go to the gym, bro. It's bad because going to the gym, bro, will incrementally increase the way that your dopamine system operates. Not overnight, it takes many, many months, but if you pair that with things like yoga, with things like a healthy diet, with things like mindful meditation, with seriously addressing and confronting the psychological barriers that you have to things like intimate relationships, to things like friendships, to things like healthy and meaningful connections in the real world, if this holistic approach is taken, perhaps that it's over message won't be so appealing, because it was never true in the first place. Like, it never truly was over. It's only over the moment that you say it is, because the moment that you say it's over is the moment that you've given up. And for a group of people who seem to be so neurotically fixated on masculinity and being alpha, wouldn't it stand to reason that being one of those people who's alpha, macho, masculine, however you'd like to put it, is a desirable outcome? Wouldn't it stand to reason then that doing things to improve yourself to reach that ultimate state would therefore be something worth pursuing? But of course, these people look at the state of things, they look at the state of their life, and then they say, no, I should give up right away. And I don't think they're helped by the people who say, just think more positively. You should really shut up about how you're talking about women. That's really horrible. And it's like, yeah, the way that a lot of these people talk about women is pretty horrible. But if you take even like a minute to try to understand where they're coming from, why they're alienated in the first place, what they're going through, it's not like what they're saying is right morally, but if you even want to change these people, or rather, if you want to aid them in their personal journey of changing themselves, then you've got to understand where that vitriol is coming from. It is simply a misdirection. They are misdirecting their own neuroticism at other outgroups as an easy way of explaining their problems. Because human beings love searching for patterns, and we love having explanations for things, especially bad things that happen to us, because it's comforting. But the world is a lot more complicated than that. Sometimes it's more simple depending on what we're talking about, but in many respects it's more complicated. And so to address these people's concerns and to have a heart-to-heart with them, I think we need to move beyond these pieces of advice that can so easily be strawmanned by these folks and push them only further down this negative rabbit hole that they're already falling down. Instead of saying, just go to the gym, bro, which is, I mean, again, this is already a straw man that they're using, as I established throughout the video, but I'm sure there are some people who have said things akin to this in order for that straw man to be based on something in the first place. Instead of saying that, treat people like adults. Treat them like they can handle the data if presented to them, and treat them like they have common sense. If those million studies that are out there that say that physical activity improves the modulation of your dopamine system and what have you, if those studies aren't convincing, then put it in simpler, more common sense, down-to-earth terms. Say, yeah, you're not going to see immediate gains in the first week, in the first month, but you're going to feel a hell of a lot better over time, because if you've committed yourself to something over a period of months and haven't given up, the satisfaction that'll come from that, from knowing that you've been consistent, is going to be so great that it will improve the way that you see yourself. And if it improves the way that you see yourself, it will also improve the way that you interact with others, because other people are keen to notice the energy that we put out. We're like sponges for other people's energy. If we're putting out negative energy, people are going to absorb that energy onto themselves, and it will make you less desirable to be around. It's sad, but it's a fact. I know that the people going through many of the horrible things that they're going through don't like to hear that. I used to be one of them. But the sooner that you acknowledge that, the quicker that you can address the fundamental problem, which is that you're putting out that energy in the first place. And the answer is not to put on a brave face. It's not to repress. It's not to be the tough man in the room. It's to be actually tough, which is to admit fault where it is valid to admit fault, and to address said faults to thereby become a better man in the process. And that's what it's all about. This it's over nonsense. It doesn't get to the root of the problem. Just like those rudimentary they're not even explanations. They're just people telling other people what to do, which I doubt there's very many adults who like to be told that without a good reason. If you can provide like a common sense answer that respects the person that you're talking to, instead of talking down to them as I did at the beginning of this video, then I think you're gonna be more convincing. And that's the only way that this issue can be resolved. You've got to have a heart-to-heart with these people and tell them, man, I know it's hard. I know it hurts like hell, but you got to take a look in the mirror, and you got to assess what exactly you're doing that's alienating other people, and then look at those things and make a genuine effort to change them. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen overnight. It takes months. But with each small change that you're able to make, with each small step that you're able to take, if you're able to congratulate yourself and positively reinforce that behavior, what do you know? It's more likely to occur in the future. So these small steps have to be taken, and you have to allow yourself to fail. Because if you allow yourself to fail, eventually those failures are going to become less significant over time. They're going to become less big because you've learned things in the process of all the other ones. And eventually those failures are going to combine together to ultimately culminate in one big success story. And that will disprove the "it's over" narrative, because it quite literally is not over. Okay, the last thing that I want to mention before I continue gaming like an absolute boss is you cannot let, and this is a point that I've made multiple times on this channel by now, but it's worth reiterating because it's worth reinforcing. It You can hear this a million times till the cows come home, come hell or high water, but it will never. The point itself is so worth hearing that hearing it a million times won't do it justice. You cannot you cannot let yourself continue to go down a bad road with negative thoughts. That's what I was building to with the whole, the just think positively thing at the beginning of the video. No, just think positively is not a good solution to the neuroticism that like genuinely mentally ill people face, or people who are facing real mental problems face, even if they don't have a diagnosis. Telling them that is not going to help, but telling them this will help. And because this is what helped me and many of the people with whom I associate who experience similar things. It's not about just thinking positively. It's about putting your emotions into context. So all emotions that we experience are transitory. They are transient. And so that means they occur for a short term, on the short term, for a limited period of time before they switch back to homeostasis and you're back to normal, or they switch to something else which is different. And so treating your gut feeling or whatever you're feeling in the moment as the end-all be-all, as something that should influence your decisions, it's going to be a huge mistake, because you need time to calm down and rationally assess what your future decisions ought to be if you don't intend on making a big mistake. Additionally, with people who are neurotic or have some kind of issue mentally, it is very easy to fall down a negative road and to start walking down a negative road in your own mind, and then to indulge in that. So let's say, you start feeling bad and it leads to some bad thoughts, or you start having some bad thoughts and it leads to you feeling bad. And then it keeps escalating and escalating and escalating until it spirals out of control. You have the power to intervene early on. Early on, you can say to yourself, I refuse. I would prefer not to. I know that what's going on here is negative, and I'm not going to indulge in these thoughts and feelings that exist only to push me further down this negative road. I'm going to breathe, I'm going to exit the situation, and I'm going to give myself some time. And then you can revisit the concepts, the situation, or what have you with a fresh head and approach it more rationally, instead of just staying there in the heat of the moment and potentially doing something impulsive because you've let your thoughts spiral out of control. And this is a huge thing, because there are people online, and I'm sure in real life as well, who form their entire identities around like these neurotic fantasies that they've built about themselves where they start feeling bad, their train of thought goes down a negative road, they keep going further and further down that road, and then it gets cemented as like a part of their identity. I think this is really, really bad. And it, of course, is going to lead to people being more miserable because in your own mind, it's been confirmed that the misery is all justifiable by some measure of objectivity, when in reality, it's only verifiable by the delusions that your mind has conjured up in response to the feelings that you have or the feelings that your thoughts have created and then have now been reinforced by new, even more negative thoughts. And so you have to stop that negative thinking in its tracks, not because you should just think more positively, bro, or whatever, but because that type of thinking is irrational. And so you need to give yourself time to breathe, to exit the situation, to speak with a supportive friend who has a good head on their shoulders, or what have you, until you're kind of leveled out and can make the right decision, say the right thing, and so on. Even if you're stuck in a situation with someone where you may be prone to say or do the wrong thing, if you can intervene early on by just recognizing what's happening or what's about to happen, you can let that person know, hey, I think I'm starting to get mad right now. I think I'm entering a bad state. Maybe now isn't the best time. And there is massive power there. There is a huge power in just saying, no, I can't talk about this. I don't consent to this. I need time to work through my own shit. And if you do that, if you give that, if you allow yourself that simple liberty, then your relationships with people and with yourself, it's all going to be a hell of a lot more stable. And when you put it all out into words like this, it sounds like a pretty simple process. But we are creatures of habit, and this takes a long-ass time to implement. So that is why, as I said at the beginning of the video, this deserves reiterating. Because you've got to reiterate the hell out of this if you want to cram it into your brain. But the moment that you do, you're still going to fuck up sometimes. Let's be real here. But the moment that you do, you're going to fuck up a hell of a lot less. And that's what I've seen with myself.